Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is addressing the UN General Assembly right now. Let's listen in.
Please, order in the hall.
We're actually walking out of the room as the Israeli Prime Minister is getting ready to speak. This is his chance to address the UN General Assembly after several leaders over the course of the week have called him a war criminal. Let's listen.
Hostages languishing in the dungeons of Gaza. Ladies and gentlemen, last year, I stood at this podium and I showed this map. This map. It shows the curse of Iran's terror axis. This axis threatened the peace of the entire world. It threatened the stability of our region and the very existence of my country, Israel. Iran was rapidly developing a massive nuclear weapons program and a massive ballistic missile program. These were meant not only to destroy Israel, they were meant also to threaten the United States and blackmail nations everywhere. From Gaza, Yahya Sinwar dispatched waves of Hamas terrorists. They stormed into Israel on October 7th and committed acts of unspeakable savagery. From Lebanon, Hassan Nasrallah had launched thousands of missiles and rockets at our cities, terrorizing our citizens. In Syria, the murderous dictator Assad hosted Iran's forces, tightening a noose of death around our throats. In Yemen, the Houthis launched ballistic missiles at Israel while choking global trade at the mouth of the Red Sea. So what's happened over the past year? We've hammered the Houthis, including yesterday. We crushed the bulk of Hamas's terror machine. We crippled Hezbollah, taking out most of its leaders and much of its weapons arsenal. You remember those beepers, the pagers? We paged Hezbollah, and believe me, they got the message. And thousands of terrorists dropped to the ground. We destroyed Assad's armaments in Syria. We deterred Iran's Shiite militias in Iraq. And most importantly, and above anything else that I could say to you or that we did in this past year, in this past decade, we devastated Iran's atomic weapons and ballistic missiles programs. So here's where things stand today. Half the Houthi leadership in Yemen, gone. Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, gone. Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, gone. The Assad regime in Syria, gone. Those militias in Iraq, well, they're still deterred. And their leaders, if they attack Israel, will also be gone. And for Iran's top military commanders and its top atomic bomb scientists, well, they're gone too. Israel's 12-day war with Iran, which I renamed Operation Rising Lion, that's from the Bible. This 12-day war will go down in the annals of military history. Our daring pilots neutralized Iran's missile defenses and took control of the skies over Tehran. And you saw this. Israeli fighter pilots and American B-2 pilots bombed Iran's nuclear enrichment sites. I want to thank President Trump for his bold and decisive action. President Trump and I promised to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, and we delivered on that promise. We removed an existential threat to Israel, and a mortal threat to the civilized world. We lifted a dark cloud that could have claimed millions and millions of lives. But, ladies and gentlemen, we must remain vigilant. We must remain absolutely clear-minded and vigilant. We must not allow Iran to rebuild its military nuclear capacities. Iran's stockpiles of enriched uranium, these stockpiles must be eliminated. And tomorrow, UN Security Council sanctions on Iran must be snapped back. Thanks to the resolve of our people, the courage of our soldiers, and the bold decisions we took, Israel rebounded from its darkest day to deliver one of the most stunning military comebacks in history. But we're not done yet. The final elements, the final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job. That is why we want to do so as fast as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, much of the world no longer remembers October 7th. But we remember. Israel remembers October 7th. On that day, well, I'll tell you, you can remember October 7th too. You see this large pin here? It's a QR code. What I ask you to do is hold up your phones, zoom in, and you too will see why we fight and why we must win. It's all in here. On October 7th, Hamas carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. They slaughtered 1,200 innocent people, including over 40 Americans and foreign nationals from dozens of countries represented here. They beheaded men. They raped women. They burnt babies alive. They burnt babies alive in front of their parents. What monsters. And these monsters took more than 250 people hostage. And those included Holocaust survivors, grandmothers and their grandchildren. Who takes hostage grandmothers and grandchildren? Hamas does. So far, we've brought home 207 of these hostages, but 48 still remain in the dungeons of Gaza. 20 of them are alive, starved, tortured, deprived of any daylight, deprived of humanity. These are the names of the 20 living hostages. Matan Angrest, Gali and Zerv Berman, brothers, Elkanah Buchbot, Rom Braslavsky, Nimrod Cohen, Ariel and David Cunyo, another pair of brothers, Guy Gilboa Dalal, Eviatar David. You saw the picture of Eviatar David, emaciated, forced to dig his own grave. Maxim Herkin, Eitan Horn, Segev Kalfon, Bar Cooperstein, Omri Meran, Eitan Moore, Yosef Chaim Ochana, Alon Ohel, Avinatam Or, and Matan Tsengarker. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do something I've never done before. I want to speak from this forum directly to those hostages through loudspeakers. I've surrounded Gaza with massive loudspeakers connected to this microphone in the hope that our dear hostages will hear my message. And I'll say it first in Hebrew and then in English. אחינו הגיבורים, מדבר ראש הממשלה בנימין נתניהו. אני פונה עליכם מעל בימת האו"ם. לא שכחנו אתכם, אפילו לא לשנייה. העם כולו איתכם, ואנחנו לא נשקוט ולא נרפה עד שנחזיר את כולכם הביתה, החיים והחללים כאחד. Our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter and we will not rest until we bring all of you home. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to special efforts by Israeli intelligence, my words are now also being carried. They're streamed live to the cell phones of Gazans. So to the remaining Hamas leaders and to the jailers of our hostages, I now say, lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages, all of them, the whole 48. Free the hostages now.
We've just been watching Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressing the UN General Assembly. As he took the stage, a number of delegates walked out of the hall, drawing applause from some of the crowd. Netanyahu's touting Israel's military actions against Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran, and thanking President Trump for what he called bold and decisive action against Iran's nuclear facilities. He says the world may have forgotten about October 7th, but that Israel has not, and that the remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City, and they will remain a threat until Israel finishes the job. And let's bring in ABC's Matt Rivers outside the UN, State Department reporter Shannon Kingston, and foreign correspondent Ian Pannell for more. Matt, you're outside where protesters gathered for this speech. What was the reaction when these delegates walked out?
Yeah, you know, they kind of rippled through the crowd here. This isn't a huge crowd at the moment, Diane. There's probably a few dozen protesters here. These are representatives of some of the hostage families there that Prime Minister Netanyahu was talking to. And of course, that moment where people walked out, they listened to it. It rippled through the crowd. That is the kind of spirit that a lot of these people would want to hear. I think the question is, and we're going to go talk to some people now that we know that that speech was broadcast inside of Gaza, what do they think of that? Do they think of that as sort of a cheap political stunt? Is that something that they're happy about? We're going to go talk to these people here shortly, now that we know that happened, and get a sense what they might think.
Ian, you spent a lot of time in Israel throughout the course of this war. What do you make of Netanyahu issuing this message to the hostages still there, saying that his message is being live streamed essentially, or live listened to throughout Gaza, and speaking on behalf of Israelis right now? What's the sentiment in Israel to his messages today?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of thoughts. I certainly think Netanyahu's critics and many people will accuse him of cynicism. He said we've surrounded Gaza with loudspeakers. They were streaming the message onto the phones, cell phones of everyone inside Gaza. I mean, given that the hostages themselves are believed to be held deep underground, it's clearly highly unlikely that anyone who was the intended recipients actually heard that message at all. But there is an attempt by Netanyahu to try and separate the Gazan people from Hamas, to try and alienate Hamas. I don't think there was any great surprise in the messaging there. I mean, he was absolutely adamant that there wouldn't be any wavering, wouldn't be any change of strategy, that all hostages, all 48, 20 of whom are still alive, should be released from Gaza, and that Israel will continue its military operation. I mean, he touted all the successes he said they'd had against the Houthis. He erroneously claimed credit for the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the dictator of Syria, when it wasn't his to claim benefit for, but still saying that Hamas has to be dealt with.
And Shannon, we heard Netanyahu there thanking President Trump by name. How significant is that ahead of their meeting on Monday?
Well, it's very significant. Of course, he wants to curry as much favor as he can with President Trump. But I think it's interesting to note that if Trump's speech at the UN earlier this week sounded kind of like an essay application for the Nobel Peace Prize, Prime Minister Netanyahu's was pretty much the opposite. You saw him hold up that map, talk about what he described as very successful Israeli military and counter-terrorism campaigns through the year, literally crossing off Israel's enemies. But of course, the concern is this will foment more anger, more tension, and perhaps more attacks towards Israel.
All right, Matt Rivers, Shannon Kingston, Ian Panel, thank you.